Okay, let's just jump right into this because what we're looking at today is a really wild pitch. We're taking one of the oldest, most famous stories in English literature, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and completely turning it on its head. This version, called Verdant in Gold, pretty much tosses the classic tale of noble chivalry right out the window. And in its place, something way darker, way stranger. Think Renaissance occultism, like you'd get from a classic comic book, mashed up with the kind of gothic, whimsical horror you'd expect from, say, a Tim Burton movie.
And to really set the mood, we start with this line from the story's new hero. And no, it's not Gawain, it's the sorceress, Morgan Le Fay. These words immediately tell you everything you need to know. This is not the Camelot you learned about in school. This is a critique, a full-on deconstruction of the legend from the inside out.
Which, brings us to the big central question of this whole project. It's asking us to flip the entire script, to seriously consider that the character we've always been told is the bad guy, the one pulling the strings of chaos, might actually be the one fighting for a much deeper, more important kind of truth.
So, let's start with the world itself. Because to really get what Morgan is trying to do, you first have to understand what she's trying to tear down. King Arthur's Camelot, which in this version is known as the Gilded Cage.
Yeah, this is what's so fascinating. This pitch completely reframes the whole idea of virtue. In this Camelot, society is totally stagnant, obsessed with keeping up appearances. The knights, they're not really heroes. They're celebrities, Trapped in this system of herd morality. Their famous code of chivalry isn't a source of strength. It's a set of shining, polished chains, a rigid rulebook that stops any kind of real, messy human evolution.
So, who in their right mind would want to bring a world that perfect and polished crashing down? Well, let's move on and meet the woman who sees it as her absolute philosophical duty to do just that.
In this retelling, Morgan is so much more than just a spooky witch. She's been completely reimagined as this brilliant Renaissance Neoplatonist philosopher and an anarchist. She looks at the code of chivalry and sees an oppressive, totalitarian force. So her goal isn't just some petty revenge. No, she wants to set off a psychological apocalypse inside the minds of Arthur's knights, to force them to wake up and face the messy truth of the world they've been trying so hard to pretend doesn't exist.
And this is just a brilliant meta-twist to her character. She's actually aware that over centuries of people telling this story, her own identity has been shattered into all these different characters. Anna, the sister; Morgause, the mother; Morgan, the sorceress. So she's trying to reclaim her true power as one single being, the Morgan, a triple goddess. And to do that, she has to literally break the false continuity of Camelot's story, the very narrative that ripped her identity apart in the first place.
But an architect needs a tool, right? A wrecking ball to smash the walls of that gilded cage. So how exactly does she build her perfect instrument of chaos?
Well, she starts with Lord Bertilac, a man who, kind of like her, feels totally stifled by society's rigid rules. And through this terrifying, hallucinogenic alchemical ritual, she just transforms him. He becomes the Green Knight. But he's not a man in green armor, he's a living, breathing biological weapon, an amoral force of nature designed for one purpose, to test if chivalry can actually survive a confrontation with the raw, untamed truth of the natural world.
And this whole test, this whole game, it really just boils down to a fight between two very important symbols. It's a battle for Gawain's soul, represented by what's painted on his shield versus what's offered to him in secret.
So on one side, you have the pentacle. Traditionally, it's the symbol of Gawain's perfection, right? But here, it's reinterpreted as a trap, an endless knot of impossible standards that literally cages the human soul. And on the other side, the green girdle. Traditionally, it's a mark of his shame, a symbol of his failure. But in this version, it's a symbol of liberation. It represents choosing the chaotic, messy, biological need to survive over some rigid, artificial code.
And that's the absolute crux of it all. When Gawain decides to take and hide the green girdle, it's not a moral failure, it's his awakening. He's choosing messy, complicated life over a perfect, sterile idea. He is unplugging from the simulation of chivalry and finally seeing the world as it really is.
Now, a story this layered, this complicated, it can't really be contained in just one format. The whole vision for Verdant in Gold is what you'd call a transmedia project, told across two totally distinct styles.
The first part is imagined as a comic book series, really leaning into that dense, poetic Alan Moore kind of vibe we talked about. The pitch actually calls for those tight 9-panel grids, deep philosophical monologues, and this really psychedelic, cynical tone that would let it fully explore all the alchemical themes behind Morgan's one-woman revolution.
Then, part 2 is a stop-motion animation, channeling all that gothic, whimsical energy of Tim Burton. The visuals here would be everything. Camelot would be all these suffocatingly bright pastels and perfect, rigid symmetry. But the wilderness? Oh, that's a dark, twisted German expressionist world, all rendered in just black, white, and a piercing emerald green. It's this stark, beautiful contrast between artificial order and natural chaos.
And the animated story would unfold in a few parts. You'd get a prologue movie showing Bertilac's tragic transformation, so you actually feel for the guy. Then, a series would follow this pale, spindly, nervous version of Gawain on his horrific quest. Morgan shows up in disguise as this repulsive old hag, just watching everything like a silent judge. And the ending? Oh, it's not about Gawain being shamed. He comes back to a cheering court. But his eyes tell a totally different story. He's got that 1,000-yard stare of someone who's seen the cracks in reality and can never, ever unsee them.
And all of that leaves us with this one final, lingering question. This entire reimagining, it forces you to think about what virtue even is. If a code of honor, no matter how beautiful it seems, is actually a prison for the soul, then what does it mean to break that code? Is it a moment of weakness, a failure, or is it maybe the ultimate act of liberation?